Welcome to the show today. I am very pleased to have Ambassador Anwarul Chowdhury with me. He is a global peace advocate, a distinguished diplomat who has promoted world peace and also recognized the role of women in peace. And he has served 2 terms as the UN Security Council President, and for 6 years as Undersecretary for Least Developed Countries. He was actually appointed to that role by the UN Secretary General. So thank you for making time for us today. I'm very honored.
Me too. Thank you.
Let's start with the work that you've done for advancing the culture of peace, not just peace, but the culture of peace around the world. Give us an update on the last couple years about the nonviolent movement and also the increase in respect for human rights.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. I think the more and more people know about what is being done to advance the culture of peace, and media surely has a very positive role to play. And the program of action that UN adopted on the culture of peace identifies especially the informative and promotional role of the media in advancing the cause of the culture of peace. Well, I believe that during it was at the initiative of Bangladesh, when I was the ambassador of Bangladesh to the United Nations, that we proposed that the culture of peace should become a part of the agenda of the United Nations. It was previously being discussed in various other parts of the world, particularly in UNESCO, but it was never had a high profile at the United Nations General Assembly. So we included this in an agenda item I wrote to the Secretary General at that time. And then finally in 1999 we could get a program of action on the culture of peace. There was an international decade for culture of peace declared by the UN from 2001 to 2010. All these things happened, but not much progress was being made in advancing this wonderful concept, which was developed in the context of post-Cold War situation in the world. We thought that we have an opportunity, we have a determination to really transform the world into a peaceful, livable, with opportunities for everybody. And also we thought that whatever has been done so far by the United Nations has not really made peace sustainable. So we thought that it is very important to start with oneself, to become an agent of peace individually. And then with that individual empowerment, we can influence our communities, our families, our societies, and then make a bigger move towards peace. So that was the basic purpose of this program of action on the culture of peace. It identified 8 areas, starting with education, then sustainable development, human rights, equality between women and men, respecting tolerance, solidarity, understanding among people. Civil society as a group in various parts of the world was in the forefront of this movement for the culture of peace. They have come forward with lots of enthusiasm. At the end of the international decade, we created a survey. 1,000 NGOs from all parts of the world reported what they did during the decade, how they promoted the culture of peace. But the governments have been rather slow because it does not give them a kind of a political support. All governments are always interested in continuing in their position of power. But they felt that this is so focusing on individuals and self-transformation that is very difficult to implement. And they didn't want to take a longer-term view. All governments, unfortunately, this is the downside of democracy, that they have to go to an election every 4 years or 5 years. So they cannot work with a longer-term view for the benefit of the people, for the benefit of the country. So they have been slow, though some governments have been good. Incidentally, in the among 193 members of the UN, only 4 countries have what we call the ministries of peace, departments of peace. So we are sort of telling the governments that even if you cannot establish that kind of department, at least give in your messages. The leadership should talk about the culture of peace and the need for addressing individual and collective challenges in life through non-aggressive, non-violent, peaceful ways. And that is very important. Last 2 years, I should say, one of the notable achievements for the culture of peace had been that the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations has convened last year in 2012 and now in 2013 2 successive high-level forum on the culture of peace. And this high-level forum was convened by the President, organized by his office, with the member states, with civil society, with media organizations, to profile the values of the culture of peace and how it could be achieved. So that had been, if you ask me about last 2 years what has happened, one is this one, the other is again renewed energy of civil society through what they call this umbrella initiative called the Global Movement for the Culture of Peace. Now they are working together to go beyond what they have achieved at the decade.
Right, and as you described that, I think of a recent interview I had with Arun Gandhi, where he described that we need to not just promote peace itself, but address the hatred within each of us, because that is the fuel for hatred, and
yes,
we need to change that within each of us. So it is, I think, a profound
Absolutely.
concept you have, the culture of peace.
Yes.
Very good. My next question is about educating people in terms of tolerance and democracy. And what can you talk about the recent improvements in that area, perhaps with technology or communications? Mm-hmm. What have you seen where people are improving their tolerance and their democracy?
This is a big challenge. I believe that, and I'm happy that you mentioned about Arun. We worked together. I think Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence had been one of the major inspiring philosophies in my personal life and in my work for the culture of peace. I think, yes, he is very correct to sort of put down the hatred in ourselves. And I think in that context, the concept of forgiveness is very important. That we need to forgive people, because if we keep cherishing or keeping inside ourselves the animosity, the enmity that we have for one reason or the other, it will, because failure to forgiveness only affects me. It doesn't affect the party or the object of my hatred. So it is self-killing. So in that way, it is very important. In terms of the availability of the technology, the internet and all the social media, I think had made world more close than before. at least today's young, I'm very impressed to find them very willing to reach out to the rest of the world, to know about them, to find out. But for every advance that we make, particularly in science and technology, we find always a downside. There are so many hate websites in the internet, and that's terrible. They're spreading hate absolutely without any embarrassment, any shame. But I think I'm always a believer in positivism and victory over negative things. And I believe that ultimately technology will become and has become in a big way, a positive force towards change, reaching out to the people. We can encourage people through this. We are also trying to engage young people in the work for the culture of peace, and they are bringing in their technological knowledge, knowledge of the internet in a big way. And I think that is wonderful. There is an organization called World Assembly of Youth, based in Malaysia. And they are doing a wonderful work to promote the culture of peace, to promote the role that the young of today can play in promoting the culture of peace. So technology and involvement of young people is very, very relevant, and I take it in a positive way, despite some of the negative things that we see in the internet.
Well, that's a good point. When I think of the freedom you just described of people, the freedom to have a hate website, I think that the other side of the freedom that I hope to see is that young people will use social media and the internet to communicate more with each other, to understand each other better, so that a teenager in America might communicate with a teenager in Bangladesh and understand the differences between their cultures, so that later on there's less chance of them being enemies.
Yes, absolutely. That is very true. What I emphasize, that much of the today's hatred or intolerance or even suspicion comes out of the lack of knowledge.
Ignorance, yes.
Ignorance is, so the more you know about each other, less you feel like, going terribly hateful against each other. So that is a big thing. And also I tell another dimension of this, that that young of today, and for that matter anybody, should not be afraid of differences. Differences are the real engine of growth, because you know each other's differences and try to benefit from that. Because you know that at the end of the day we are all part of same human family. But we come from different backgrounds, we come from different ethnicity, we come from different countries, so we will be different. But that doesn't mean that should scare us. We should be more welcoming of the differences, even in our own societies, even in one family. You see people of different kind.